Hi everybody, welcome. Toby, Tom, I don't know if you want to sit in the circle. We just, to bring everybody together, please feel free, or sit where you like, it's fine. Welcome to the first of the Westway Trust public forums. Thanks for being here and participating. We hope this is going to be one of sort of a series of forums over the course of the year for people to share thoughts, suggestions about how we can move the organisation forward and make improvements and deliver on all the things that people have been asking for. The first session today is and actually, sorry to say, I'm Alex Russell. I'm joint CEO of Westway Trust, for people who don't know me. Mark is co-chief exec, and we've got two trustees with us today as well, Tamsin Renshaw and Angela Spence. So they will also be on hand to talk things through. We're wanting this to be kind of quite discursive, a conversation, and open it up for people to kind of comment on all things, really, not to just necessarily be a kind of like, Q&A with us, but actually to discuss amongst ourselves. So that's the idea of it. We thought we'd start with governance, and hopefully everybody's picked up the structure, existing structure as it is. We tried to kind of make it as simple as possible, and just to outline how the current structure works, and then to talk through what people think about that, pros and cons, questions related to that, points of clarification, and then hear from people about ideas about changing that, making improvements. So, has everyone got a copy? Yeah. So what we're trying to do here is show sort of how the structure currently works. So what you have is the Board of Trustees at the very bottom of the pyramid, and we've tried to show here that there's sort of community involvement, because we appreciate that actually that's something we want to make sure there's much more of at every level. So there's community representatives on the board. The board is currently made up of 12 people. 6 of them are independently appointed, and they can come from all parts, and are made up of sort of skills based. And then we have 3 elected members which come from the membership. The membership elect 3 people to sit on the board, and then finally there's 3 appointed council nominations from RBKC, and that's the current structure of as it stands today. Those people, along with people from the community, make up the subcommittees of the board. And you'll see again there's representation there on the property committee and the charitable purposes committee. And so we have co-opted members of the community involved in that. And then there's the staff structure, which shows how the different parts of the staff group work to ensure that there's governance across various key areas of our work. And then we have the external forums, panels, steering groups, which again look at very specific parts of the organisation and how that can be, and how that functions. And then finally there's the members at the sort of the top of the pyramid, if you like. So I don't know if people want to have comment on that now. Yeah, sure. If you say your name, and then they can capture it for the minutes. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name's Jacob Aretti. I'm a local, grew up in the area. I'd just like to just bring this up, make a point, that Westway 23 called for public forum meetings. I think it was in the 2016 AGM. We felt there was unresolved issues that weren't being able to be dealt with in the AGM at that time, that had been going on for some years. And one of those issues was the issue of the changing of the constitution and how the minutes were logged. Well, it's now 2019. Am I right in saying that this is the first forum that we've had since that request?
No, I think we started a short series on the 2016.
Sorry.
There were only three. That sounds about right. And we haven't had them since. That's right.
So the point I'd just like to make is that if we remember what, it's quite difficult even to sort of focus. We're not that we were called, and I don't think those minutes have been resolved. Just to give us a sort of like a sort of feeling of where we're at, or so it's quite hard to sort of, obviously at that time these were urgent things, but 2 years has gone past, 3 years has gone past, 2 years, yeah. So it's we're in a different place from where we were calling. A lot's happened in that time, and so I'd just like to make that point, really.
Okay, thank you. We are minuting this as well, so everything will be recorded and shared. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that this is where every time someone speaks into the microphone, it's being recorded as well, so there'll be a transcript of the meeting. So try not to talk without having the microphone. I'll make sure I'm running around so everyone gets a chance to talk. And just, your name when you grab the microphone for the first time. Thanks.
Well, the floor is yours, so if you
And Tom, you had some thoughts on governance. You've been involved in that discussion.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, not being rude. Have you got a structure? Because I don't know whether to say everything now. No, not like that for the meeting. Or is it? It's just for us to say what we want. Okay, fine. Looking at this very quickly, are you interested in revising the constitution? You've got 6 independents, 3 elected, 3 appointed, 2 of whom are Tories, so probably may not live in the area. Are you prepared to consider revising the constitution, looking at a new one? I mean, we've got 3 proposals, which are all different. One is a board in which elected people have to gain a qualification after 3 years to get back on it, which is controversial within W23 and people like that. One is having a community board which is elected, and an implementation board which sits below the community board, which implements the community board's policy. The logic is that the implementation board can have the skill sets you need in a board like HR and finance. So you can bring in experts at board level for those particular tasks. And the third one is a stakeholders board, which is a bit like the community board, but you might have representatives for young people, 20 to 60-year-olds, older people, the environment. Is basically you say, what are the key stakeholders within North Kensington? Can we represent them on the top board and have an implementation board lower down? The logic is that community people, the elected people from the community, aren't going to know how to run a £6 million organisation, but they do know what they want out of it. So they can set a policy, and you get the experts to implement it and employ the staff to implement it. And if the implementation board says, well, that's infeasible, we haven't got enough money, they can go back to the community board and debate that, okay? So what I'm saying is there's a lot of push for a change in the constitution. And we'd certainly be happy to work with you on that. Looking very quickly through the structure, health and safety, I just marked down, have they discussed, this is a staff group, have they discussed air pollution? Because that's such a critical thing, and does it get discussed? You don't need to answer straight away, but it's something which should be on their agenda. I'm not sure how these community panels, festival panels, I know how Bay 22 steering group got elected because I was on it. I'm not sure how they get elected or how the people are selected for them. And similar with the public forums, which I suppose is this, and the members' forums. I think it's this middle bit, which I'm not clear. Whether it needs to be democratic or whether it is or not, I don't know. Generally, as I've got the mic, the AGMs don't act on the comments of the members, or don't say why they've decided not to act. I mean, I'm quite happy for Westway to say we're not going to act on this because we think it's uneconomic or there's other priorities, but we put stuff up and it's your major forum of the year and nothing happens until the next year. So on air pollution, we put that one up since 2014. There hasn't been a real response. Some people argue about the stables. I don't know what the state of play is. I obviously argue about working... Is it too near me, too far? It's gone off.
Just turn the volume down a bit. It's when the speaker goes back into the microphone, that causes the feedback.
Okay, right. I obviously argue about working class white children, Caribbean children, and educational achievement. Doesn't really go anywhere. I question whether you do any sort of cost-benefit analysis between the new posts that you create and the grants that you give out, whether if you're spending £40,000 on a new post with pension and national insurance, is that more economic than is the results going to be greater than putting the money into a £40,000 grant programme? I don't know, but that's it should be in your thinking. You should be comparing the two and saying what's going to be best for the community. This isn't in any order. On the Constitution, on the Constitution.
Are we okay? Hang on a minute, Tom.
Want to be on record? We need you on record.
Why is it?
Someone here. Can you give it me?
Hello, can you hear me? 1, 2. Where's the mic? This mic. Where's the speakers? The feedback loop. If you they're not make much difference. Hello? Did you hear that? Oh, wow, gosh, it's me again. Right, sorry. Back to the Constitution. I think your current structure with members, actually they're only electing 3, but by having member charities, I always saw that as a way of the borough trying to keep the local population out as much as possible. Your risk is that you get cronyism and patronage, and I think that showed itself to some extent at the last AGM. You had the W23 block arguing their case, and then the only other 2 real contributions were the Bowls Club and one other, which was what's happened about our grants, and are we going to get grants? I think that structure where charities are members and receive grants is inevitably going to have some sort of patronage or cronyism in it, and I think you need to be careful of that. That's just an observation. If you go down the individual, you could have individuals as members. There's an issue around gentrification, but it might work. You could have residents' associations, more members. There's an issue that we struggle to get them to be reflect equal opportunities, because it tends to be the white community that turns up, despite leafleting everywhere and having announcements in the mosque and doing what we can. That seems to be what happens. So what I'm saying is, the current charity type membership I don't think is working, and I don't think you'd have had the 2-2 investigation or whatever it's called, the inquiry, if it was working. Moving down a bit, still on governance, not a criticism of Mark at all, but the members say they don't understand the accounts. They're quite complicated. You've got the 2 new pie charts of income and the way things are spent. What I'd like to see is a pie chart, 2 pie charts on each cost centre, which shows what is being spent and where the incomes come from. So sort of the one which comes to mind is supplementary schools, because it's just easy to bear at the top of your head. You have a chart saying what's being spent internally on staff, direct staff for supplementary schools, what overheads are being applied, what's being given out to supplementary schools in grants, and then a similar pie chart which says where does the money come from. X comes from the borough, Y comes from Westway Trust. So you can see immediately what's happening on that cost centre, what's happening on sport, what's happening on grants. I've run out of notes. Okay, look, I'll leave it at that for the moment. Want to come back? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I furiously scribbled notes. On the Constitution, yes, we do want to look at it, and so governance, Constitution, and composition of that, and all of. So I mean, this is the time to sort of talk about these things, feed in the ideas. The board is going to have a first conversation with itself on the 26th of February to talk about this very topic. And from that meeting, I think we need to sort of publish kind of what the process is for looking at it, and when people should be feeding in, and all of that sort of stuff. But and that actually does relate also to the membership and what type of membership the Westway Trust should have going forward. Is it still appropriate to have organisations and members? Is there a different way to do that? And then what different role that membership might have in terms of electing, appointing trustees, and all of the things you sort of talked about. And there's various different models. I think it'd be good to kind of have another conversation with you about how you see all of that, so that we can feed it in. Yeah, absolutely. So that's on that. On the analysis of giving out more grants versus having staff delivering projects and working with groups, that is a conversation that is happening a lot. It's quite hard, I think, without spending a huge amount of resource on analysis, to kind of actually get a very scientific answer. And I would say we couldn't say for sure it's much more value for money to do it this way or that way. At the moment, we are advocating a kind of apportioned strategy. So we'd say, yes, we do need some staff to activate things, to get things done. So we're looking to recruit an environment manager. We think we need somebody in post to sort of drive some projects and get things going, and get funding into the organisation and the community to do some of those projects. But we will also fund environmental projects and organisations that want to do environmental stuff. So it's kind of doing both, I think, and that's how we're currently looking at it. However, we're flexible too. So if we thought there was a better way, then we would look at a better way, absolutely. But that's kind of how we're doing it at the moment. On air pollution and health and safety, Mark can answer that because I don't sit on that, but I don't think we do. But it's a good suggestion to probably throw in, actually, particularly with staff and tenants and buildings. It's a very obvious one that that there are it's increasingly becoming an issue for people. There's also something around sports facilities and having sports outside and under a motorway, and that I think we're collecting data on a lot of this stuff at the moment, so we'll have a better idea of what some of the issues are. Happy to share that as well. How groups are selected in this column here around community grants, panel, festivals fund, Bay 20 steering group, community advisory group, in a range of ways. I think Bay 20 was done through a panel of local people, local sort of leaders, councillors, and various people in positions, not councillors, sorry, so other people in various positions, who then ran a recruitment process aimed at local people, and it was a skills-based thing, I think, there. The festival's funds come out of the Westway Arts network, so people put themselves forward, but they're local artists. Community grants panel is other trusts and funders in the local area who have an understanding of the patch and how to administer grants. And the community advisory group to the IR review has been to be honest, it's done in partnership with One Voice. So we had conversations with One Voice about who's appropriate to sit on that group to give it legitimacy and robustness. So it's a mixture. Val can answer your question about white working class boys, I think, and the challenges there, if you're able to, Val. And accounts, yes, definitely want to present them in a way that people can understand and want to be fully transparent. So again, if you tell us how you think it would be better done, and we can look at that. I mean, we started with that wheel, but it'll evolve and change for sure. Anyone else want to? Val, do you want to come back on that question on supplementary schools?
or just to say that the supplementary schools are voluntary organisations in their own right, which we support, and it's around trying to get. We did talk to you about doing a homework club on Swinbrook, and I think there was a community grant that went out for that. But I think most of the supplementary schools, although they started around one major ethnicity, most of them started in the 1990s, and then sort of developed over the years. They still retain some sense of that ethnicity, and it's the group themselves that have got together and keep themselves going, and we try and support them as best we can. We've coordinated some funding applications, but I've worked with a home education group on Goulburn before that were white working class that tried to set up their own school. They then put their kids back into mainstream school. So I'm happy to work with any group that might want to get together and coordinate some activities. Very happy to do that. We were asked by one school to try and go up and do our Strengthening Families, Strengthening Communities programme there. So we did do that. But yeah, it's something I'm happy to explore, but I have to say I'm sorry I hadn't looked at the data for how many, but I'm not absolutely sure that the RBKC collect data in that way anymore. I need to check that, but I'll make sure I've checked that by the next meeting. I mean, part of it, I also think youth clubs are quite good places, and I've often thought about trying to do some homework in youth club, because I do think white working class kids do go to youth clubs more, and that could be an area. But really our support has not been to deliver them ourselves. The only one we do deliver ourselves is the one on the Travellers site, and we're there for under 8s twice a week. We've been there for 10 years twice a week. But we haven't, and we did one for Grenfell up at the Curve for a year, just after the fire, and that was a specific request. But we don't try and deliver services ourselves. We try and support other organisations to do that.
I mean, my comment is that you need to be much more clear. You've got a reaction clause. I'm not criticising all that stuff, but it is a reaction clause. I can remember Mark saying to me once, people have got to have a passion to set up a supplementary school. Well, I agree with him, but if people don't know how to do it, then they won't do it. If they don't know it's possible to do it, they won't do it. I can remember 20 years ago when I lived up on Dalgarno Way, white working class woman saying, well, all the supplementary schools are for ethnic kids, aren't they? And I thought, well, yeah, there's truth in that. I mean, my position is that I worry about race relations in North Kensington, and that's one of the main reasons why I plug it. Living in the area, and having lived in the area for 28 years, it's a lot calmer than it used to be. But if you disadvantage a group, particularly an indigenous group, for a very long time, with an economy that's changing very fast, there's likely to be problems. And the white kids have killed black kids in the past. So, it's something we've got to be fair about, and I'd encourage the Trust to be proactive and say, how are we going to keep high educational attainment in North Kensington for all the children in North Kensington?
Can I just make a couple of comments, and I'll pass it on just in response to those things. So I think in terms of change of constitution, yes, there is a will to look at that. When it was changed before, it was the first time that we'd looked at that equal balance of borough-appointed trustees and elected trustees by the community organisations. And even then there was a discussion in the cabinet of the borough about losing control, reducing the number of trustees they appoint. And this was a first move to change that balance. I couldn't tell you exactly where the appetite for changing that in the town hall is, but I think this is the time when we start looking at, do we need to keep that equal balance? I mean, the Royal Borough has a constitutional right to veto any change of the respective proportions of elected trustees and nominated trustees, but that is a conversation we're quite happy to have, and it's really important that we get the views of the community when we represent those in terms of supporting that sort of change in constitution. So yes, that was a first move, and I think there'll be a second move hopefully this year. It depends on the feedback we get and how we can develop that. Obviously I'll make a comment on the accounts. Yes, the accounts are complicated. There's a very complex accounting standard for charities. It tries to set a framework for all charities, which means we all have to comply with something which doesn't quite suit all of us. And it inevitably means lots of things are lumped together. So even Val's work in learning is lumped together with other initiatives. And within learning, we have 5 or 6 cost centres, and each of those have 2 or 3 different funding streams. So trying to get to make that easily comprehensible as to where each of those initiatives is funded is hard. It doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try, and I think the graphic thing we're going to have to work a lot harder on. So yeah, I mean, I take that. It's a very technical set of accounts, lots and lots of pages. Do the real issues pop out? And I think we've really got to work on some graphical representation of that. So thank you. We will do that. The other thing it's the health and safety aspect. I think our health and safety committee has dealt with very much those regulations which are set out as regulations under the Health and Safety Act. Air quality wasn't one of those things, but it's becoming, I mean, a much bigger thing. And I mean, you made some really interesting suggestions at the AGM, and that's something we should look at in terms of working environment, not only for the trust team, but for the tenants in our buildings. And if we can move that on to the wider community to make some initiatives, it would be really good to improve the working environment, living environment. So yeah, and that's why we're wanting to put more resource into environmentalism. It was never part of our constitution, it was never part of our charitable objects, and that was one of the reasons why we changed them, so we could be more adaptive to the sort of initiatives that would come out from these meetings and from engagement. Anyway, just as a response, but this is really to hear your views.
Just to comment on what Tom said about race relations, and I'm very, I'm concerned about that and interested in that they're good in the area. I'd say that the reason why there isn't, things are quieter now is, my opinion, is because the police took literally a sort of laid siege on this area in the 80s through and turned the area into a war zone. Literally, I think a lot of people are in prison and were forced out of the area, and whole criminalisation of certain of black people in this area is a way in which they dealt with a lot of problems, and so the quietness hasn't come through sort of resolving long-term issues. The quietness has come through brutality and putting people in prison. That quietness that we can appreciate now has not come from solving issues. And I think that this is the Ladbroke Grove. We have a history of fighting racism. If you think about All Saints Road and the front line and Carnival, and I think that should be, there should be for any constitution that should be, the social aspect should be the forefront. I mean, this is Ladbroke Grove, okay? That I think that should be at the forefront of things, and it's my opinion that it's not. doing enough in that respect, and I suppose the 2-2 Foundation review is proof of that, and it's a crying shame, because there is difficulties and tensions and resentment in this area, and it's sort of the same old people that are lacking opportunities or being held back, and people that live here have to deal with that. I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s in this area, and it's only, you know, you're born into something, and it should be a priority of any powerful institution in this area, number one priority, to address these things and lead in these things and make sure that there's that these things are on top of the agenda. And I'd like to say about the management, the selection, just concerned that Alan Brown mentioned that he felt that there was yin and yang within the selection of the roles. The joint CEOs. Okay, and I don't see a black person. I see two white people, and representation is an issue within a lot of trusts, but especially in this area. Where is the representation? And it seems like the chair is quite happy with his yin and yang depiction, which doesn't seem to take into account representation of the area in ethnicity anyway, I suppose, and you know, I mean, there's no local. I don't see there's no local person was not given opportunity to take the role, and that the trust should be, you know, structured in a way that people can, you know, be skilled and to take, you know, self-govern and to take those roles, and that there aren't is an indictment, you know, is a criticism of the trust, because you've been here for 50 years or 40 years. By this time, you know, we should be self-governing the whole place, and there shouldn't be a lack of people. And if there is, it should have been notified a long time ago. It's not okay to have people coming in and taking a lot of money for doing jobs and handing out, you know, relatively small monies in funds. So, yeah, representation. How are you going to? How are we going to get, you know, a local CEO? How are you going to enable that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's not something you can just click your fingers and say, yeah, you know, this is going to happen tomorrow. This is about, as you say, making sure that there's skills, there's opportunities across the board, and we can focus on the CEO. It's quite difficult for me to obviously comment on that, being that I'm one of them, and the board, you know, it's within its remit to decide how it wants to recruit and appoint that role, and it's for them to comment on it rather than me. It feels a bit inappropriate, but I think the broader point about ensuring we've got many more local people involved in this organisation at all levels is important, and one that we do take really seriously. And we have introduced ways in which we've improved that through the Charitable Purposes Committee. We have a staff team that has 58% of the staff from the local area. We have introduced the Community Advisory Group panel to the Institutional Racism Review, which has got local people driving it, Bay 20 steering group, driven by local people. Same with the fund panels. But there's a lot more that needs to be done, Jacob. I absolutely agree with you, and we're at the start of the journey with this. We really are, and it makes this job really hard, I think, for the people that work in Westway Trust when we, don't have that body of people who are local people who are deeply ingrained in the fabric of the community, who can tell us what's going on and what's needed at any one time. That doesn't make us a very strong organisation, a very responsive and relevant organisation, and that's something we're desperately trying to address. So we're nowhere near that. We're right at the start of that journey. I think that's all I can say about it, really.
Could I just point out that we're not at the start of this journey? This journey started back in 2014 when Niles Hailstones walked into the AGM and noted that this organisation did not represent our community and was in fact holding up cardboard cutouts of young black children to cover up who was actually running this organisation. So those of us in this community have been part of this journey for at least the last 5 years. So it's not correct to say that we're at the beginning of this journey. And it's even less correct because members of Westway 23 spent hours at the Tabernacle with you, Alex. Yes, you were.
Whoa. So 3 months of meetings every week with you, Alex, yourself, yeah? So I'd have to... So basically the community has spent a lot of time trying to input into the Westway Trust and on different levels. But I'd like to also say in the 2014, this whole thing about the Constitution, we know the last time in 2014 it was changed for regeneration. That's the way that it was changed so that the regeneration can happen. It was so that the property board can be the decision makers, and we know that the trustees don't really get a say on everything and don't actually get to see anything. So when you're talking about the constitutional change, yeah, we all know, you can look at me like any way you want actually, Mark, but we know what we know. We've been at this long enough, we know what's going on, yeah. So when you're talking about the Constitution and we look at the Constitution, the problem is that no one trusts the trusts, and we have very good reason in the community not to trust the trusts. So you talking about you're going to look at the Constitution, and you're going to do this, you're going to enable whatever. We know that's a nonsense, because you're going to make the decision, and everything anyone else will just have to follow through. But if there's a sincere if we're going to sincerely enable the community and have this transformation of the Westway Trust that is desperately needed, and you want the community to actually trust the trust, then you need to be properly allowing the community to make those decisions. And this whole thing of like, what's that term that you use on day 20, and co-design, that was, it's just bandied about, which is nonsense as well, because you're not co-designing anything. You're making decisions before you actually bring it to the community, and it's a foregone conclusion. Everything else is just box ticks, and so you can put it through. So if there is a sincere effort to get the whole community involved in this and decision making the decisions, rather than you setting up something and saying this is what it is, that's what it needs. So the question that I would like to ask is, who is going to be making the changes to this Constitution? Are you going to be allowing the community to be a big part of making this change in this Constitution and saying what's needed?
Thanks. I think the short answer has to be yes. That's why we're here. That's why it's a subject of, this meeting starts constitution and strategy, because any changes this time round have to be discussed by the community, and we need to hear community initiatives in how that looks like. I mean, I would respond in terms of the charitable objects. I mean, what we actually, the purpose, the fundamental purpose of the change in 2014 was to change the size of the board that was felt to be too big. 17 is very large in modern thinking, and to change the makeup. The change of the charitable objects was really in line with, because charity law changed in 2006, and it was to bring it into line with charitable purposes that hadn't changed since it was actually the first Queen Elizabeth. So it's actually to bring it, and some of charitable purposes didn't exist when the trust was set up. But it was to try and move away from, I mean, when the first constitution started, the provision of sporting services, and that was a very big part of what we did, and it felt like too much focus. So it was actually to broaden the remit of the trust so that we could respond to what the initiatives that were coming from community engagement, such as environmentalism, which just wasn't in the constitution. We have purposes now which are a little more wide-ranging, but it is for forums like this to tell us what is really important for the community. We can't change the constitution by ourselves. It has to be the AGM or an EGM. It has to be the members of the trust who change it. Certainly we would expect to be doing, if you like, the administration of that, but we have to bring in all of the initiatives and thoughts that we receive to get a structure which works. I mean, fundamentally, what we're trying to look at is something where the local community feels and actually has the influence over the strategy and allocation of resources of the trust. That's what it's about. But we can't change the constitution. It has to be the membership. But we have to have the debate first as to what will achieve that. So it was.
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, hello.
There was a group set up for the Constitution, which I think Maggie Tyler was in, Tom was in, Rabina and Camilla. So you started that change many, many years ago, but that group came to a halt. It wasn't continued. It didn't, I'm not quite sure, but there's an email somewhere where it says why that group was halted. Tom obviously was a part of it, so he must know. So obviously there was something put in place, but it wasn't carried forward and continued. So how, I can't quite understand.
In addition, sorry Mark, what you're saying just doesn't make sense. If the board was 17, previous to 2014, there's not a single law on the planet that holds you to having 17 trustees. You could have simply had 10 trustees, as you have now. You could have had 12 trustees. It doesn't make a difference. You didn't have to reduce it to that. In addition to that, the actual practical effect of that change was not about making it a smaller board. It was about bringing on people who were property and finance specialists who would actually push through the new destination Westway strategy. To say anything else is just a complete lie. It's nonsense. It's completely disingenuous. No, you don't have to respond just yet. Thank you. I'm not finished quite yet. Thanks. It's just disingenuous to say that that was simply about making the board smaller. You took off a load of conservative councillors off that board, and you replace them with property and finance people. That's indisputable. It says it in black and white. That's what happened. And those people were pushing through the Westway Destination Westway strategy with Angela McConville at the helm of it. And her job was to run those things and go through with those things. In addition, you then say that the idea of that was to give the community more control and to expand the objects of the community. Can I remind you that since 2014, stables shut down. Flyover music, cultural venue, shut down. Maxilla nursery, shut down. Pop-up cinema, shut down. Skate park, constantly under threat, only being given short leases. So to say that after all of that time, 2014 was the time where everything changed and the community was suddenly in control and the community suddenly got its needs beyond sport is complete fabrication. It's just not the case. But how would you know that, Mark? Because you're not part of our community. Because you don't live here in West London. Because you don't deal with that day-to-day reality of losing your music venue, of losing your nursery, of losing your stables. You don't deal with that. You drive in from Woking every day. The fundamental issue we have here is that this trust is being led by people outside of our community. That hundreds of thousands of pounds, possibly even £500,000 every year goes to people like yourself and Alex, who are not from this community. Our money is being used to generate a leadership that doesn't know about our community and isn't even qualified to lead our community, isn't qualified to know about, it doesn't know about those things. Instead, it shuts those spaces down. And that's just the evidence in front of us. So then to come up with some kind of mealy-mouthed business about, oh, well, it was about making the board smaller, to go to recognise current charity law, just says everything about what's going on. Because those are the little details you're interested in, rather than the details of our spaces that have been systematically shut down to the point where people are having to play drums on the green on a cold Wednesday night. That's the reality that we live because of your governance, because of your guidance, because of your leadership. So the idea that those of you here who think that the story started just now, you think that you're the ones who have any chance of making this work, is just absolute fantasy. Because the first thing that needs to happen is that you go. It's that simple. There's no other way. And this comes back to the pain that you and I discussed with Eve, with Alex in the room, not long ago, because of that Bay 20 debacle. Pain. The pain that we've been suffering in this community for decades. It's time for you to suffer that pain. It's time for you to understand that you are not the people to do this for our community, that we are the ones who need to do it for ourselves, as was intended back in 1971. That's the fundamental change that's needed. We really need it, Mark. We really desperately need it. We need it, Alex. We need you to go. And we need you to take Alan Brown with you. Because an organisation like this, which in relative terms is massive, a £5 to £10 million organisation every year, tiny fractions of that money could go out to many organisations, some of whom are represented here, and make a huge difference. But it doesn't go out to them. It goes out in £2,500 here, £1,000 there. Useless money to these organisations, whilst you take home £90,000 a year. It just doesn't work. It doesn't add up. So we really do need this change. We need it now. But it really is going to start with people like yourselves who might have your qualifications in some areas. You don't understand this community. You don't understand what we really need. And you've proven that over the past 5 years, whilst members of Westway 23 have been trying to make these changes. And if anything, you have been resisting them and resisting them and resisting them. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on any of the sort of constitutional points? I think there's points of accuracy that probably need to be.
Come back on the constitution.
Yeah.
I really don't want to respond to sort of a personal attack because, you know, we are committed. We're committed to changing an organisation that is responsive, and I'm really sorry that you're resistant to accepting that will, you know, and I personally have been involved in this organisation for a long time, and I really want to make that change. And there are some things we've done in the past in terms of grant funding that we're looking at again because they work really, really well. But you won't be surprised, I will respond where you've said I've lied, because that just is not true, Toby. And you specifically state that I've lied over the Constitution, and that's not true. That we could have reduced, without changing the Constitution, we could have reduced the size of the board. That is not true. The Royal Borough, the Royal Borough had the right to appoint 7 trustees. We had no choice in that. They could appoint 7. We had, under the Constitution, to put out to election 7 posts, 7 opportunities, and we would have 14 elected trustees, and we had to have the 15th trustee. So that is a fact. So it's not a lie. We changed the Constitution.
You can have spoken with them and just asked them not to put forward 7 trustees.
What does
that say of your relationship with the borough?
This was making a permanent change to the structure of the organisation, so it would be more relevant. And
more relevant was then to take on six finance and property people.
No. And the relevance was that we could have representation in the community. We could also recruit to a skills base, and the independent trustees now for skills that were identified. Sorry, Toby, and I'm going to finish this point, which has allowed us at the time to increase the skills base that was felt to be short at the time, and it now allows us to concentrate on recruiting additional trustees who are local. So we actually have more ability.
Thanks to the pressure we've applied.
Yes, of course.
Yes. So thanks to the pressure we've applied. But who were the 6 trustees? Who were the 6 trustees you initially brought on?
What we're talking about today is how we could change the Constitution to make it more relevant. No, because what I'm trying to do is talk about the future and the views to go forward. And you want to talk about individuals, and that's not right. We actually have a structure now that allows us to recruit specifically for whether it's a skills base, whether it's local residents, and the local round was particularly successful in attracting local residents, and I think people who could make the sort of change we need to the underrepresentation on the board. It was quite successful, and we want to go forward. So, I mean, I'm certainly challenging that you're calling me a liar, which I am offended by, and I'm not. I've always tried to be absolutely honest and straightforward.
But you're not being honest, because you're not saying who those 6 co-opted trustees were at the beginning of the change. You're not being honest, are you? So be honest, who were they? And what were the skills that were necessary at that time? What was it?
I'm not disputing that it was a technical recruitment for particular technical skills. That's absolutely right.
Which was what skills? Property and finance. How hard is that for you to say?
Well, I'm trying to think if there are any others, but fundamentally,
no,
yes,
there weren't any others, because it was about regeneration. It was about giving Angela McConville everything she needed to push forward with anything that she wanted. That was the whole point, and you can't even admit that. It's just.
But I'm not denying it. But what I'm trying to say is this is about looking at how we create a board in the future that is representative of the local area and gives the governance that we want.
We tried to do that 4 years ago, and we had an agreement from Alan Brown that we would do that. And what happened? Our trustee stepped away from the board because she felt that it was a tokenistic effort, that it was no good. Another African Caribbean woman stepped away from the board because of the views that she felt were detrimental to African Caribbean men in this area. Another African Caribbean woman also stepped down without board trustee. So it's just madness to say that this isn't an effort that has been purely generated by the local community. It has not been generated by you in any way at all. It has purely been down to Westway 23 members. We have not put this forum out on our page, on our Facebook page. Our Facebook page has over 2,500 members, dwarfing anything that you have. But we have not put it out tonight, and hence this is the turnout. You are not engaging with us. You are not engaging with us in a way that we feel able to have a proper relationship with this organisation. There are significant members in this area, African and African Caribbean people, who will not come onto your board. Sure, you might be able to find some African Caribbean and Asian people and non-white people to come onto your board. Yeah, sure, you may. But there are plenty, myself included, who refuse to come onto your board. How can that be acceptable in 2019? Because you do not have a functioning relationship with us. Because we do not trust you at all to make this work. It's not tenable. It's not a tenable situation where you can't access 2,500 people on Facebook because of your relationship with significant members of this community. That's not tenable for a community organisation that rakes in £10 million off the back of us.
Yeah, I think we want to address that, Toby. We do. I mean, this is the point of Okay. Well, obviously, I think that I bring experience and skills and empathy and understanding of this area, of what it's like to be a minority, to be prejudiced against in my personal life. I've experienced that, not in the same way. I know it's not. I know it's different, but I have experienced it, and I have empathy with that. And I've worked on lots of campaigns and agendas around social justice. That's where I come from. That's my background. That's me for sure, through and through. And if I wasn't here, I'd be doing something very similar, in a very similar role, because that's what I care passionately about. And I care passionately about this area. I really do. It's distinctive. It's unique. It's every day is wonderful being here. It's challenging. Don't get me wrong. It's challenging, but I'm committed to this, and I want to stay here. So, and I'm going to give it my all. If it's not good enough, fine. I'll move on. But while I'm here and while I'm doing this job, what I want to do, and what I hope people are starting to see, and we do get feedback from many other people in the community who are saying that they are seeing a different approach and a different attitude, and that they can see that we are trying to change as an organisation, and change takes a long time. Culture changes. It's hard, it's tough, it's not a wave of magic wand, and even if you change me, you probably still have challenges culturally. It's tough to do that, but we are trying to take a different approach to things, to involve people, to engage people, to give more influence, devolve more power. We want to do all of those things, and I have to say we don't know how to do all of that. We don't, and this is kind of the point of having these conversations, is to try and understand how we can better do that. So is it these meetings? Is it workshops? Is it, I don't know. I mean, there's myriad of ways in which we're trying to engage, trying to involve, trying to let go of the control and all of those things that people who do the jobs that we do often, have been brought up to do. But that's what's happening, and we're trying to signal that with the way in which we're working through the Bay 20 project and all the other ways we've talked about in terms of governance. But it is the start of this journey, and I know it's not the start of the journey. You're right. You're absolutely right. Completely. That did start in 2014. Absolutely. And probably even before that. You can chart it back further, in my view, to other things. If we were to rerun history, I think there would be a hell of a lot of different outcomes in terms of the things you talked about before, about the stables, about the flyover. We wouldn't be doing it that way. Absolutely. And we don't want to do it like that way again. I don't. And not on while I'm here. It won't be happening. But yeah, we haven't got all the answers, and we don't know the right way. And we're trying different things. We're trying to do different types of forums, different types of, advisory groups, all of those types of things. We're trying lots of different ways to do it, and we want feedback about how to do it better, have a different approach. I think one of the things the trustees, and Mark and I need to take this away actually, is think about when we have our away day with the board, and we talk about constitutional change, talk about board structure change, and all of those things, we're thinking about the process of how people are engaged in that, and they actually can, they can see where their influence and track that, rather than just think that you put your voice into a survey or a forum, and then what happens? I think we really need to think that through. So welcome points on how we might do that best. I think it's Jacob, and then it's Emily.
One of the ways of doing this is what Westway 23 had asked for, is general meetings with members and non-members. That's one way. If you say you want to make the change, can we commit to having these general meetings with members and non-members, everyone here?
Yeah, members are invited to this.
No, general meetings, not public forum meetings. General meetings, which is what was asked for.
Well, I mean, this is as important in hearing the views as any other meeting. If we can have a general meeting of the trust, and if there's an agenda item, which is fine, which wants a vote, but these are the forums where we hear the views, and we hear a lot of that at the AGM, and this is one of those forums. We think it's as important to get all those views. If there is a matter that needs to go to a vote, then we have a formal meeting, but this is
we don't. You know what I said? We don't trust you, Mark.
But
we don't trust you at all.
Okay.
Okay. So this forum, as much as you can record it, you can write it, you can do whatever you want with it, but it's not an official meeting. It doesn't actually exist in terms of history. If it comes down to it, you can bury this tomorrow. You can't bury a general meeting. We don't trust you, Mark.
Well, when this is recorded and the minutes are published, and they'll be published online, they'll be available there for all eternity. We can't. Yeah, and
you're genuine about wanting to make some real changes, and we have a general meeting where all the communities are welcome to come, members, trustees, everyone. Can we have a general meeting? That's a yes or a no.
as long as we've got agenda items, we can have those. We can have those.
One or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can work on that. So that's a yes.
As I say, as long as there's an agenda, we can have a meeting. But I don't want to underplay how important these are to gain views. Sorry, Alex, okay.
Oh God! So, I guess. So as a trustee of the trust, I have to say it's not, and Alex and Mark can vouch for this, that it's not exactly a pleasant time at the moment on the board. I think there are ongoing discussions around what the trust needs to do. There are tensions on the board about what the trust needs to do. And I have to say, it's not been easy these past few months, particularly recognising that we just can't keep going the way we're going, and recognising that, as a local organisation, it's not a comfortable place to be when you're at meetings where, you just recognise the real issues that are happening in the community, and the strong sense of feeling for the trust, which, for me personally, it's not a great place to be. So we're really trying. There's truth in saying that we really are trying to see what can be done. The away day that's coming up, we've pushed around looking at the Constitution, and there's a few of us on the board who are really trying to see what can be done here. And this is not about it being about us as trustees. This is about the community. So what we're really pushing for is a real honest look at what can happen and how you can put decision making truly in the hands of the community about the trust. It has to be structural change, and it has to be a look at the membership and what it means in terms of the membership and who has the voice in the trust, because currently I appreciate the fact that it's not representative. It isn't representative of the community, and that is something that I think we ought to be looking at, and we've said this as trustees on the board. I think there are many things that we've got to address, and we won't just step aside, and we won't just listen to what we have heard before. We're really trying to bring about some change, but we are working with the trust. We're working with Alex and Mark because they're here, so we're here working with them. And that's the position that we're in at the moment, is what can be done, where can we go, because we know that we can't keep going in the way that we're going as a trust. So I'd like to think that at some point we can be held accountable by you as the community, because trustees, that's where we are accountable to you. So, we've got to answer the questions that you put to us in terms of what that change is. We've got to be able to answer it. We've got to be able to show that something has been done. But yeah, that's as much as I can say. I mean, but it isn't a new journey. We recognise it's an ongoing journey, but that's where we are.
Can I just say that the first meeting in the church after the AGM, which you were there, so this is why I find it very hard to see that there's going to be a change, because Alan Brown said that I was still at the stables then and there was a chance to make a change, that he will make an interim agreement so that I could continue. He went away and got somebody else or somebody within the trust, then wrote to the local licensing authority, told them not to work with me. I have all the emails and everything saying that you never ever will be working with me, and don't have anything to do with me. I have the emails, so it's not, I'm not making any of this up. It's just stuff. This is why I find it very difficult to understand how and why. How do we going to see change when people like you sat there yourself, and then that's what he went and did? And I just find it extraordinary that the change is going to come from now, and these things have all happened. And why do that to somebody? It's highly unnecessary to actually do that to someone. There's no reason to do that. So that's really all I have to say.
I'm just going to follow up on what the points that Sarah's making. The thing of trust, because you're talking about change, and then on one hand you're doing things like that, which is stopping Sarah from setting up her business. Okay. So personally, you're both welcome to stay and do work voluntary like we do. So it's not really a personal thing. You're very welcome to be here and, do whatever you want in another form. You're very welcome. You'll always be welcomed in this area, because why not? So in one hand, it's not really personal, yeah? And I'd like to say thank you to Toby, because, the work that he does, the amount of time he spends, and the knowledge that he has, if he wasn't here tonight, we would just be continually sort of being fed this stuff which wouldn't be challenged, and he's got a young child, his partner's pregnant, he's not here for a laugh. He's not here just because he's got a thing against you, personal thing, It's not really like that. And, as a resident, I'm so grateful for Westway 23 and what they've done. And the amount that Toby has, the understanding that he has of the trust, and that he can challenge you on details. You know, he is immense for this community, immense, all right? And he's not getting paid. And you two are both, it's not a personal thing, you are welcome here to help rebuild the stables for community, you know, days, for stuff like that. You know, come along in a different capacity. So, going on with what Sarah's saying, you know, this thing of change. I mean, so Bay 20, I didn't even know that a planning application was put in. So we didn't even get an opportunity, yeah, to say to put in a statement. You know, we weren't informed of a plan. I didn't know about a planning application, right? So I didn't get the opportunity to put in a comment to anything about it. I didn't get any say on that because I didn't know about it, right? Acklam Village, right? Well, this is what's happening now. This is current. This is like as we speak. These are things that are going on now. Okay, so Acklam Village, you put through the second planning application. Again, we wouldn't have known about it. We wouldn't have known about that. We wouldn't have had a say to be able to, you know, comment on it, which is like, as a resident, is like meant, you know, we're meant to be able to do that. We wouldn't have had an opportunity if it wasn't for. Do you know who I'm going to say? Rest in peace, Tim Burke. Yeah, he went out of his way to inform the community to on social media. Within, like, we had two weeks. He found out about it and was able to bring it to attention so that we could have a say on that. So, you know, and that's like now. That's like that was like last 8 months ago that happened. 6 months ago. You know, it's the same thing. You're talking about trust and you said change, right? But these are really key things. These are big issues. Whole Bay that have been contested over for 30 years. Acklam Village. You know, these aren't small details. These aren't like, you know, little, you know, talking to people. This is like Acklam Village. You know, that's where the adventure playground was. I don't know if you understand the importance of adventure playgrounds in this area. Okay, because a lot of people do. Okay, they understand the importance. I don't think your corporate property developers understand the importance of adventure playgrounds in this area. Okay, I'm telling you the important. I mean, Westway Information Centre. Okay, right. Alex, you're saying like you sort of, you know, you have an activist campaign background. Well, there's a lot of activists and campaigners in this area. You never once contacted them to say, look, this is what's happening. Not as far as I know. Okay, the council moved the Citizens Advice Bureau, right, with the assistance of the trust, okay, to a premises which is only accessible by a narrow, steep staircase, right? At the same time, the council is saying they want that the library, okay, is not fit for purpose because it's inaccessible, right? Like, if any one of us campaigners had known about that, I mean, you know, we were. So you know, those dealings, that was Angela McConville time, okay, it got moved to that premise. How did you allow that to happen? Because you're not connected to the community. You've got people here engaged and mobilized and connected, yeah. But you didn't think to call one of us and say, look, you're going to lose your the information centre and it's going to be a prep. And you say that you objected to it with a letter, but what good did that letter do? You know? And now we have the prep there. Sainsbury's already set the precedent, and now you've got the prep, and the private school. And this is happening now. This is like big thing. So Bay 20, Westway Information Centre, and Acklam Village, yeah? Right, so you're talking about change. I don't see change in that. And so we're talking about the trust and what Sarah's saying, right? And there's only one way that I will believe you about Sarah. That's if you put your jobs on the line, because you can't fail the community. How long are you gonna get to fail us? How long do you get? How can you keep on going? It's your role to make sure that we have Sarah. She ticks every, tick in the box, for this community. And you talk about the wood, damaged wood in the stables, right? That area, right, that bit of land is a God-forsaken, wasteland that only people like the travellers and Sarah have made good of. Is an oasis, okay, in a wasteland. That's what Sarah's stables are, okay? And if you want to dispute that with me, I'll spend, you can. As far as I'm concerned, that was the care, the animals is an oasis of love and animals. And if it had been there at that time, that's what the stables is. Okay? There's nothing else. She made good of wasteland, land that no one wanted. That's why the travellers are there. Because it's a bit of land that nobody else would dare, until someday when, that her space is an oasis on a wasteland, and you can't ever put it in any other context, okay? And you're there arguing against her, saying, oh, it needed to be knocked down, it needs to go, and all that. You're not on our side, man. You're not. And from the Westway Information Centre, from Acklam Village, from Bay 20, you're not on our side. I didn't get to say whether I objected or liked the planning application to Bay 20, all right? But I didn't get to say. I didn't get a opportunity. And that's a big, big, big issue. That's a, whole bay. All right, so the trust, exactly what Toby's saying, Emsy's saying, and Sarah's saying, it's zilch. But again, you're welcome to be here in a different capacity. So don't take it personally. I know it's
good evening. Councillor Marwan Naji. I'm councillor for Nottingdale, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to observe and see how this interaction is going. I know Jacob through the campaign for the library and other campaigns, but he led a fantastic campaign to save our library, Kensington, which really should not be that effort. It should be the care of our council, which I am duly elected to represent my community there. And work with my community and people like Toby, and even for the Westway Trust, Angela, I've seen recently. I just came into politics from academia, and I read very carefully what Jacob's saying from my involvement with the Resident Association. So to just elaborate slightly on where we ended up regarding the stable, I passed by it on several occasions. And especially after Grenfell, I feel there is acute anxiety amongst, it's emerging now, and which is being recognized by the NHS and CCG, and that's why they're pumping millions into our area. And but I hope it's not going to be spent on check boxes. And the immediate change I can see from whatever it's going to do in terms of governance or structure to the way forward regarding managing a complex organization. And I don't know much about the history, although I lived in the area for 27 years. still busy as a teacher than as a researcher. It's just coming into being that addressing in good faith for initiating change and really before going into the philosophical changes of organization and governance and all the details is addressing the real issues, especially after what's happening. I'm not, disputing earlier regarding selection and ideas and properties, because I was on a meeting, and this is recorded, and I'm happy to say it in public. I was just 1 week before the tragedy happened on the 7th of June. I was attending a home ownership panel, 1.5 hours from the deputy leader, and just presenting economical model for regeneration and stuff. And I bet there is no slight understanding of any parameters regarding any of the variable for two economical model. And then we had this tragedy happened on the 14th where loss of life occurred unnecessary just to save some money. So the lesson to be learned from the TMO and the council, we have a lot of things to happen with the council and our colleagues as a policymakers, but really for the immediate implementation, like Sarah, stables, to immediately act upon it, to save it, because I can see the benefit from what I see from residents, children seeking therapy. That's immediately can happen. Operation, other play areas, because I can see now this one is going to be even worse regarding the well-being of our young. So I hope the management of the Westway Trust, acting with the good faith from the trustees, supporting the executive officers until further decision coming with the community regarding restructuring, regarding organization, is if there is a study to be done to immediately act upon in good faith for local organization, what they are doing, and just address these issues immediately. There is no need for delay. Then, because there is no need for example, to go in sequential. These can be operated in parallel. So I hope this can be immediately executed. And answering for why don't we have a general meeting? Okay, we welcome sometime you have a small group, working group as a brainstorming to initiate idea, fine. So you can have a focus groups in addressing simple issues, but really to regain trust. I've been asked, to be honest, to sit and apply for skills and so on to be a trustee. To be honest, I don't want to. I teach organization change at university, and immediately I've looked at the structure, behavior, all this. I do apologize to say this, but immediately a behavior of TMO behavior like. So yes, to be honest, and with due respect to all those who are really good working, I'm saying this because I want the trust to succeed because they've been entrusted to help the community and to learn the lesson from the other behavior who now under public inquiry and what's going on. I'm not saying this in secret. There is a public inquiry going on. There are several investigations in progress. So please do listen to my community. And if there is a request to have a general meeting, I can't see why not. If there is a request to have open forums, we have very highly skilled people in my community here, very highly skilled. So I don't know. That's all what I have to say. Thank you so much.
Can we have this matter of Alan Brown stopping the development looked into? Can we just make a note of that and have agreement that that is looked into and that is something, there's a response to that? Sorry.
The answer is yes. Certainly. So we will look into that. if Sarah can share the email, we will look into it.
Well, Alex, what we're looking into was it's hard to look into because what Alan said was it was still at the process when there was a chance to spend like £18,000 to just get something back into shape, that we would be able to make an interim arrangement. And then when he went away, and then I received letters, I think they're from Teresa and Stephen, where they'd written to the licensing woman, Helen Maureen Doran at the RBKC, telling her not to have anything to do with me and she's not allowed to interact with me because clearly the Westway Trust will not be working with me. So, you know, yeah. But
Yeah,
you was I know you're going like this, but that's what's
Yeah,
the
no,
big
no, I
problem.
don't dispute it. I don't
That's
dispute it at all.
a really big problem
Yeah.
of the mistrust because
Yeah, I completely
you were
understand.
there, you heard what he said, and then you watched what he did. So for me, that is very hard to understand how you did that. And then you sort of have a confused face to say, well, it wasn't me. But,
Yeah, I think
you know, for me, that's what's it's very straightforward.
yeah.
What
It's very
are
straightforward.
you going to do? Can you just let us know
Yes.
and when? How
You
you
have
look
to
into
give
this?
Yeah, we can look into it and yeah, it depends what you share with us, but yeah, we'll look into it and respond as quickly as possible. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to be defensive because it's not good to be like this, but I wasn't really involved in seeing the projects there. I know I was at that meeting where there was lots of things
I
discussed.
know, but he was at the meeting and
Yeah.
I brought you along to support him.
Yeah,
because
this was when
remember-
Angela was running the organisation.
I remember, I know you may have just come into
Yeah.
the organisation, but I remember it very, very clearly. And if you could have reached the level you've reached in this organisation, then I think you should have been aware
Yeah.
of that, what was said.
Yeah, and
That's
and
how I
there's
feel
decisions
about that.
made at that time that I didn't agree with, frankly, and and had limited power to change it. So I know
So
that
why
isn't
haven't they been reversed?
Well, we are. We're in for planning with the new stables. We've got a grant application which is just about to be.
You have to wait
I
another year.
don't want to really
2020
start
now.
going on about it now, but
Yeah,
you know, it has been how long?
yeah, I know.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
just say we've got it in the plans. It's a 12-week project to build it and whatever, but it has gone on so that I've been left there for 2.5 years. I've
Yeah.
tried to hold on, I couldn't. And from before that, it's been going on, and it was like a 12-week project. So it's very difficult to really understand it all
Yeah.
at all. It
Yeah.
just is senseless. So.
But I think we're just for the purposes of the others in the room. I think we are fingers crossed going to get planning permission within the next few weeks for this project, which is brilliant. We have, I think Marie has drafted a funding application for you so that we can take forward the operational plan with you, and then we can look at getting some further fundraising. The trust already committed some money. We've been successful in getting London Marathon Trust money. They're interested in investing even more money into this project if we can come back to them with the operational plan and the demonstration of need and all of those things that funders need. So the commitment, it wasn't there
So
before.
what
It wasn't there
happens,
before,
so
Sarah,
whilst
but
we're
I
speaking
honestly,
about
it's there
that,
now.
what about the other,
Yeah.
so the other funding that was put into the big lottery, the Fidelity Foundation?
The big lottery hasn't got a bid because we need the operational plan. We need the needs analysis plan to go with it. So all the stuff that's in your grant application, once all of that stuff's been compiled, we can then start to
Okay,
go to those
we
ones.
were sent the other day
Yeah.
stuff that you applied to for that.
No, it's stuff that's planned to apply for.
Okay.
In order to apply for it, we need all this extra
It was
information.
planned ages ago because it was in the name
It's
of
in
the CIC.
Yeah, it's in the fundraising plan. There's a whole raft of organisations that we want to target. But yeah, so we just need those last bits of information, and then we can push that bit forward.
What you'll see on that list is a whole load of people we spoke to
Yeah, we
who
can
indicated that they would like to look at
Yeah, but
funding, but they needed.
No,
It's
it's
just
okay,
as
but what I
that,
received was what's applications for funding, and that's what I couldn't quite understand as to, you know, they had no date on them or anything like that, but they were applications for funding.
So some of them were some of them were applications that were submitted, like there was one to the Span Trust and one to one of the landfill trusts, but they were both declined. So they were rejected applications. And then the fundraising plan that Phil has put together are funders that he has spoken to. And, you know, I think I sent a quick summary of the lottery, what they would require. So they will require more detail. So the ones I sent, the attachments, have been applied for, and then the others are future funders. Okay.
No, I think going back, and where we disagreed was how much it would cost to put the old stables back into use. And we thought it was going to be more like £80,000 to get it back, and we committed to doing that. But this project is to deliver with you proper, purpose-built.
No, I understand that.
They're going to be so much better.
No, I do understand that, because I was in the premises for 20 years, so I know how dilapidated the premises was. But there was a way that you could have kept a small service going and did the bill. There was a way of doing that. There was no need to cause major destruction. There really wasn't.
Can I just know who's going to put it? It's actually very frustrating as a member of the community. You don't come to us, you go to a surveyor and say, what are your people on £100, £200 a day going to charge to do this? I know with the stables which I looked at, the actual red brick buildings, you put marine ply on both sides, you put threaded steel through, you tighten the whole lot up. I've done that to bay windows, I've seen people do it to chimneys. It's a cheap job, it'll last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The office area, which they had, I didn't look at how to do it, it's more questionable, it has serious rotting, but the actual stables the horses were in could be done with marine ply. The reason why you use marine ply, like external ply, the horses piss on it, so it's strong enough. Now, we know how to do that. Your women's toilet act, and they've been dead closed for 10 years. It's probably £100 of raw materials to get them working. And, you know, the guy from Argentina, the organisation behaviour specialist, I've got a lot of respect for that skill. He knows about organisational myth. The organisational myth in Westway is that these toilets will cost 10, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds. I've looked at them. The ladies' toilets, so long as the Stuart Turner pump works, and if it doesn't, we'll send it to Angela and Hendricks, that's where Stuart Turner work. As long as that works, you can do it for, you know, a few metres of copper pipe and a few connectors. The gents is more of a problem because the wall was knocked down by presumably Westway stuff to allow market traders to store their stuff in, and they broke the manhole cover. But, you know, that's more of a mess. So long as the ladies, so long as the sewers work for the ladies, and that's affected by that manhole cover, and what the market traders chuck down in that case, that's one of the reasons why I haven't done it myself, is that's an unpleasant job. But MZ says she'll sit next to me whilst she's on because I need somebody to motivate me. But it's you know, it's frustrating that you don't come to the community and say, well, what do you think? I quite said, you go out to a surveyor and I look at the stables and I say, oh yeah, that would cost a lot. You come to us, we come from the squatters movement. You know, there's £100 million worth of social housing in North Kensington that has been purchased by the squatters movement in co-ops. We know what we're doing. We know how to take wrecked houses and get them habitable in weeks. It's as simple as that. I mean, when I was young, I used to mend roofs. I don't do it now. I get fined. Sorry, I have been rant. Eddie was wanting to speak.
I'm not going to use the microphone, but I'm going to just say, you talk about the TMO. I sat in many meetings with the TMO on Lancaster West when we were getting abused by them. Sitting in this room, I get exactly the same feeling. Unease. I can't stop my legs shaking. My neck is being tight the whole time. Your organisation does exactly to me what the TMO did. The TMO, thank God, has been consigned to history, and I hope and pray one day the regime that rules at the Westway Trust is consigned to the same history. The last time I was in a public space and the Westway Trust was being discussed was at the West London Crematorium when Tim Burke was being buried. And they were talking about the Westway Trust and the influence of the Westway Trust on the end of Tim Burke's life in the pop-up cinema. There were 750 local people who had to sit and listen to that. Listen to how a local charity was becoming implicated in the death of a hero, a local hero. Someone who came to every AGM and stood up and talked and notified the community about what was going on. That was the last time I was in a public space and I heard the Westway Trust being discussed. 750 people listening to the way that Tim Burke had been treated by the Westway Trust. I'm going to talk about two things very, very quickly. The model that you imported when you got Fielding Mellon down here, when he was sent after being groomed by Merrick Cockell to come and infiltrate the trust, to bring Angela McConville for your trips to Mipping, in Cannes, in the poorest ward in the country, the fourth poorest ward in the country. You're sending people to Cannes, to Mipping. You're a charity. Your model is to take all the publicly owned buildings in North Kensington, working with the council, sell them or give them to private education, and then use those displaced organisations to be rehoused underneath the Westway. And you think about that. You think about the CAB, how you allowed that building, or how the council allowed that building to be turned into the Notting Hill Prep School. But no, they couldn't do it on their own. They need your collusion. You were there at the time when the CAB was moved up to a totally, totally inappropriate spot. So that model and all the development that comes from that needs to change. 72 people died in Grenfell because that's what they were interested in. They weren't interested in our community, people who live here, people who can benefit from the great things that can happen because of the money that comes into the trust. That's one thing. The second thing I want to talk about very quickly is I want to talk about Grenfell. I want to talk about the Trust's response to Grenfell. Now, in your AGM publication, you talk about the great things you did. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't individual staff members who did stuff, but I want to know what the Trust did for Grenfell, because I know what I heard, and I know what I read. I heard that Angela McConville in a meeting said, Grenfell will be a great opportunity for the Trust to make some money. And I saw how Angela McConville tweeted Grenfell. I saw how she tweeted in like November 2017 a picture of 72 people who died in Grenfell. And then 4 hours later, she was saying this is the saddest day in my life. 4 hours later, she was publishing pictures of champagne glasses and Wellington boots, saying, I'm off to the country to have a great weekend. That's how much you care about Grenfell. That's why I came into your organisation and told you to take those green hearts down, because you're not worthy of putting up green hearts. You don't represent our community. You don't know about our community. And I don't dispute for a minute people weren't affected by it. I don't dispute for a minute that people didn't come out and help. But as an organisation, you don't have a right to put green hearts on your windows. You do not have that right. And I'm going to finish by saying one more thing. Two more things, because you have never contacted Grenfell United. The Westway Trust in a year and a half has not got into contact with Grenfell United. Okay? And I'm going to just finish and then think. And I'm going to say one thing. Shireen spoke at the council meeting and she said the most pertinent thing. Everything this community needs to recover from Grenfell is here, underneath the Westway. The people, the resources. So give it to us and we will recover. But if it stays as it is with Alan Brown and the current setup, we'll never recover. The wounds will never heal. That's all I've got to say.
Well, I was going to say two things. One on a personal level, and the second I'll respond to what we've done about Grenfell. So I started at Westway in 2007, and obviously, you know, I've seen all the changes happen over a period of time. And the day that I call it a coup happened, basically, when we came in one day and the previous CEO, we were just told that, you know, they had to wait outside the boardroom the night before, and he'd gone. He said, oh, well, that's what happens with CEOs. He was a bit blasé about it, but we didn't see him again for many years. And that was the sort of period of a lot of change. We then had somebody who just was a trustee and then stood down from being a trustee and became acting CEO. never really knew what that person was up to. And then Angela came. Now, what I would say is, in some ways, and this is a personal view, is that I feel her, when the reason that I understood for the coup, there was a lack, the trustees were frustrated that there wasn't enough building development on the land, that the land, you know, was there for the community, but there'd not been enough building development. So they wanted change, and they wanted change quick. So Angela came in with that brief and just got going. And unfortunately, didn't consult enough with the community, and then those awful drawings came out, and basically, but you know, basically it just went from bad to worse. But what I would say is, and I'm not somebody to, you know, look at the past and always blame the people that were there in the past, because I think we all have to take responsibility. But she was a very dominant person in the trust. She had a huge influence. And, you know, a lot of us within the trust, and probably a lot of people outside the trust, probably have suffered, you know, almost post-traumatic stress syndrome from it, because it was feeling that the organisation was going in a particular direction, and we did try and do stuff about it. And what I would say now, from my vision, my personal vision, I've seen a very, very different, for the first time since that very first coup, I've seen a different stance from Alex and Mark. And what I would say to you is, give them 2 years. No. Right. What I would say is about the Westway Information Centre was owned by the council. We didn't have much. What could we do about that? What could we do about the library? Yeah, I know, that was fantastic. I know. And that is exactly where you're going wrong. I know. But what I would say is there is a real committed chance to try and do something different now. In terms of Grenfell, we've had somebody in post that has supported a lot of survivors. She has been in contact with Grenfell United, and we've done a report about what's done. I don't want to give particular names of individuals that have been supported. But we've done a lot of work with survivors and with people on the walkways around taking complaints to the council, getting funding, making sure that they've got the money that they should have, organising visas over and for families that were bereaved. So that work has gone on, and we've done what we can. But we have been in touch with Grenfell United, with Howard there, and we've referred people to get extra resources in terms of children. We've helped with kids getting excluded from school. We're trying to do a campaign on that as well. So we have tried doing stuff like that. There has been some work on it. It's never enough. But we have been trying to do some.
But the leadership has not been in contact, and I think that again highlights that there's a massive gap, as has been made clear this evening, is that it's appreciated that there are plenty of people in the workings of the organisation, yourself included, Val, who do valuable work and who do good work. Nobody is disputing that. Nobody has ever disputed that. I myself have made a clear effort. I will edit anything that Westway 23 writes to make it very clear that we support the staff of the Westway Trust. We don't necessarily agree that the staff numbers should be as incredibly high as they are, but we do support the so-called rank and file of the Westway Trust. The problem, as has I think been made clear this evening, is the leadership and is the executive. The executives cost something in the region of £500,000. £500,000 to this community for executives who don't even understand this community, who tried to push through a development on one of the key spaces in North Kensington, not once, at a cost of £250,000, £500,000. Twice they tried to push it through. Twice, having explicitly been told by members of the community, don't do that, stop, including members of the community who were trustees, who just weren't listened to. So, you know, I appreciate everything you said. I'm sure Edward appreciates that, yes, there have been people, for instance, who, let me remind you, funding was brought into the trust to bring that person's role in to being. So it wasn't the trust that just splashed money at it. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. The trust did not spend money on that person. The trust brought money in, but it wouldn't just spend its money. It's making millions. It doesn't need to match fund that. It doesn't need to match fund that. And let's be clear about the supplementary schools. They're not spent, they're not afforded by the Westway Trust's money. They're contributed to. They are vastly paid for by RBKC. Okay, so it's not like the trust is somehow doing all of this work and somehow spending all its money on this. The trust is just being held up by RBKC funding, by all sorts of other funding, and in the meantime, local organisations are getting a pittance, are getting barely 1% of that money. It's a disgrace. And so this idea of there being now a 2-year period for these exact same people to continue, because when you mention Angela McConville, it's a very good pointer. Yes, she was a bully. Yes, she was a dominant individual. The Charity Commission made a warning, a very clear public warning, to be careful of such dominant individuals. But we know for an absolute fact that one of those dominant individuals at least still exists at the Trust. And potentially they're in an even worse position than the CEO, because they're the chair of the Westway Trust.
Too powerful.
We have a man who is basically a racist, who can't even see the evidence in front of his face and denies it flat out, for not 1 year at an AGM, not 2 years at an AGM, but 3 years in a row at an AGM, who denies evidence being given to him that was given to him 4 years ago. And this is a man in charge of this trust. And if anybody knows charity law, you'll know that the trustees rule, that the trustees are king, and he's the king of kings. An investment banker, a man whose last salary must have been £3, £4, £5 million when he left Schroders Bank. And that's the man that's running this organisation. You want us to see him for another 2 years, after 4 years that he's run it so far. That's absolute madness. I'm sorry. That's absolute insanity. And I appreciate that there are people in the room who have a vested interest in this, and there are people across the community who have vested interest in this. I'm not one of those people. Edward is not one of those people. Emsy is not one of those people. Jacob is not one of those people. Sarah is not one of those people. We don't have any vested interest apart from our lives, apart from the fact that I grew up a mile down the road, breathing in this shitty air for 25 years of my life, to get nothing from this 23 acres. So I'm not having people on salaries come to me and talk to me about anything about this organisation. Especially not when none of them have ever actually reached out to me. It's been all me reaching out to them. For over 4 years, it's been me doing the running. It's been members of Westway 23 that have made every significant change in this organisation happen. And not one of us have been paid for that. One Voice Community Collective might make a £5,000 grant. I might be able to organise a pot of funding for my local community artists to draw from. That's it. And you want us to wait another 2 years? No, we can't wait another 2 years. This thing has to change, and it needs to change now, and there's no way that Mark and Alex and Alan Brown are the people that are going to do that. It's just not going to happen. These two have 90,000 reasons each to not do that. Many other staff members who are making a lot of money do not have reason to make that change and push that through. And exactly as Jacob says, look at the library campaign, pure community effort. Look at Warnington College, pure community effort. And we are sitting at the top of government talking to people there. So don't tell me that we don't have the skills. Don't tell me that we don't have the experience. We are bringing literally millions of pounds of value into this community off our backs. And we get ignored, and we get smirky little grins from people like Mark Lockhart. We get looks of bafflement from people like Mark Lockhart, and it is just sickening. And there are so many of us who are sick of it. When Westway 23 first started our meetings, hundreds of people turned out. When we had the flyover, we had 3 or 4 meetings with literally hundreds of people in the room, with the same identical experiences of everyone in Westway 23. That's how Westway 23 was born. Westway 23 was not born of 5 or 6 people in a room. It was born of hundreds of people coming with their exact same concerns. People who were trustees of the organisation, ex-trustees of the organisation, staff members, ex-staff members of the organisation. We've been looking at this for 4 years. And every change that we have made has come because of research and work we have done that have then brought to you and forced you to change. And it has been forcing you to change. And your attitude, Mark, tonight just says everything for everybody to see. Because this is the attitude we get, where you can't even talk straight, where you can't even say, yes, we brought in 6 co-opted trustees who are focused on property and finance. You couldn't even say that. But this is your attitude, constantly. You can't even accept that you wrote an email to Grenfell Action Group saying, no, you will not become a member group because of the things you've written. You won't accept that you blocked my organisation from becoming a member group, resorting to outright sarcasm to block us, wanting to force us to change our constitution, a constitution that has gotten us funding from pretty much every reputable funder in the country. Oh, but the Westway Trust want us to change our constitution because there's a small line missing from it, which couldn't possibly be missing from another 60 organisations in the community, could it? No, of course not. A person who blocked me from going and seeing the Westway Trust annual reports, may I remind you, until I quoted from the Charity Commission at you that you had to keep those in perpetuity. This is the response all of the time. It's not acceptable. And it's not acceptable to have people like Alan Brown or any of you here right now. It's just not. Change, change, change. It doesn't happen with the status quo still in place. You must understand that. For real change to happen, that is an end to the status quo, and you are the status quo. And I appreciate how hard that must be for you. I appreciate how hard it must be for NGO workers to be told by people in other countries, you're not really the change we're looking for. And that's how this feels right now. So when you say, it's my profession and it's what I'm really passionate about, that's all cool. But we've got about 50 or 60,000 people in this area who can do what you do. We need real change. So forget waiting 2 years. Barely got 2 months.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't think that'd be a fair, considering what we've been through. We've been engaging for the last 4 years and it's been a fight, and to say 2 years, I mean, you know, I just want to just cry. That's what it made me feel, and for Sarah as well. The
salary cut, you know, like, and give, you know, your 4 years' wages to, you know, to Sarah or something like that, real like skin in the game, would, you know, it'd be like a bit different, but, you know, the losses that people have had in this, you know, you're not sharing that with us. You're not putting yourself out. Okay, you haven't said, oh right, you know, I'm gonna take some of this. These people are suffering, they've lost this, they've lost that, she's lost her business. You know, you haven't suffered in any way other than you get, you know, confrontation in meetings. What have you suffered? You know, you haven't lost your Ackland hall. You haven't lost your, you know, you haven't lost these things. We have lost our spaces. What have you lost? You know, until you were to say, right, you know what, I'm going to do this for free. I'm going to help this community for free. Then I'll be saying, okay, right, I'll start listening. But no, there's no, you know, you've had your way for the last 5 years, 4 years, you know, of us saying, look, and what, you haven't really, you know, there's nothing that you've gone out, you know, you know, there's nothing that you're really like, out positioning yourself, you know, you're not dispositioning yourself at all, how we are. Okay, so you're doing well, you're doing fine, except you have to go to meetings where you get confrontation. But other than that, you know, you're still doing well from this. Okay, there's no disposition from you know, until you would say, show me something where you're going to say, right, you know, I'm willing to sort of, you know, to take a loss, because we're taking a loss, we're losing out. We're at a loss, and until you start sort of showing, like, you know, actual, like, you know, some sort of solidarity in that, you know. There's no solidarity in what you're saying. So, like, we're fighting a battle, and you're saying, yeah, we're with you, but you're not really, because you know, you've got. So what's happening with Acklam Village and the Acklam Hall, the former Acklam Hall, it looks like a military fortress. Do you know what I mean? On community ground, it's all locked up. You couldn't lock it up anymore. Community fortress. What is it? That venue in there. You couldn't. It's like a fortress. So locked up.
I'll just respond to a few points, and I'll try and pick up on yours as well, Jacob. I think, I suppose I've always taken the view with change, and I have always worked in organisations pretty much most of my life that around change and social justice, and I've taken the view, rightly or wrongly, that to affect change you need people outside of the organisation or institution or whatever pushing for things. Absolutely, that is crucial. You need people inside the organisation who can navigate that and push that as well. You need both for things to change, and I've worked on big transformations of organisations around social justice, and I've been mostly inside the tent, and I've managed to achieve a lot of change, and quite radical change too. So that would be my position, rightly or wrongly. That's my starting point with this, and while I'm here, I will push for change inside the organisation, and I will push for culture change about how we do things, about our attitude, about our approach, about how we engage with people, about how we pass on power and allow people to have decision making. Absolutely, because I believe in that completely. You know, that's the agenda that we're working towards. But so that's just to respond to your point there, Toby. And
she never gets in.
I think that.
She never has a stable.
Yeah, I understand that. We're
£500,000 during that time. You still be taking that, still be in your bank accounts. What are you going to do? Like put your neck out so that you're in the same boat as us. You're not giving anything up. Nothing. No skin in the game. What can you right now? You can say, you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to work a year for nothing, or I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how committed I really am. Yeah, and how
we're trying to show that we're committed by actually delivering on the change. So we are bringing back the stables. That is so different from before, where it wasn't happening. But okay, but it's happening because we're offering Sarah a grant. We're putting through planning permission. We've raised her money already, and so we can only prove it by action. Because I understand that. I've only been doing this job for less than a year, really, actually, in terms of a permanent position. So, in that time, we're doing things differently. We are doing things differently. We're changing how things are.
Coming about to having a permanent job was done in a way that is dubious and questionable. Should you even be in permanent roles? I would argue not. I would argue that it would give us far more confidence if you were both in interim roles. And therefore you didn't have the security of your job, just as none of us have security of jobs.
Do you know what? I don't feel secure in my job, frankly. No. Yeah, okay. But it's true. I think if you're the chief executive, at any time the board can change things. It's in their gift to do that. So I treat it as a temporary position.
Not really. Not when you have Alan Brown in charge of that board, right? So that's what that comes back to.
No, but right? the board. That's
the backstop you've got there.
No, but the board. No one individual in a board or even an exec level makes the unilateral decisions, unless you're actually on board. No, but it's seriously.
You know what Alan Brown's like. Don't pretend that you don't know what Alan Brown is like. We've tried working with Alan. We've gone out and tried to engage with him, tried to be human with him, tried to change things with him. He's not interested. He's like Mary Colonel Cook up at Kensington Chelsea College. God knows where he gets his agenda from, because I can't fathom it out. I've spent a lot of time trying to work that man out. Where does he get his, what is his agenda? And how does that agenda benefit any one of us here? It doesn't benefit us. How could it benefit us? It's just, and he's manipulative.
Can we get rid of Alan Brown by the next AGM?
Please.
One, as members, we don't appoint him. Two, after last AGM, there's two issues I raised. One was about the Constitution. So he comes and tells me, I've heard that the proposal to look at the core Constitution, which has gone to one of the Labour peers had actually produced something quite good, that he rubbished that with Council Press within about a minute. He's come back with the National Trust Constitution, which he was looking at, which isn't particularly relevant within the Westway Trust context. I looked at it briefly, but he was not interested in anything I had to say about the Constitution. I spent 40 years working on the Constitution. I was doing that in 1977 when I was at Warwick University. 40 years, it's an area of my expertise. But he would say, Mr. Fitch, we think the National Trust Constitution will do. And then on pollution, he said to me, we're dealing with these national charities, are going to put millions and millions into research. It was like a First World War general. Your Toby and your generation can die of air pollution whilst we work out what air pollution is. That's what he was saying to me. Not one tree, not one daffodil, nothing. As far as I'm concerned, once Tutu's finished, and he's been, he's in the frame for his institutional racism. Once that's over, Alan Brown has to go, because he is not appropriate to this community. He's not part of the community. He's an upper middle class, lower upper class twat. He spent his life dealing in bonds. He's grossly overpaid for what is not a particularly complicated job, trying to work out what the risk is on bonds. Might be worth 90,000 a year. It's not worth the money he's being paid, and he doesn't connect with us. He's just not in the frame. He should be gone. I don't understand why we have to have him, why he was there in the first place. We've had a whole series of chairs from Scott, going back to, I assume, Mr. Maitland was somehow related to Roger Maitland, and Judge Gordon Maitland. We've had a whole series of chairs who've come from the upper classes and who have done very little for this community. So Alan Brown, as far as I'm concerned, goes before the next AGM, or we have some constitutional power to get rid of him. And no, we don't. He's just imposed on us by the trustees the Tories put in. We're free men.
develop retail, get money from the renters. But I'll just, I think you need to put a market down. Brown's time is finished. Hang on to it, and that's his
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, and yeah, I can't really comment on all of that. But I mean, I would say that if you feel Alan's not listening, we are listening. I'm listening to you, and I want to hear it, however difficult it is, and however painful it is. We're listening to it, and we're wanting to respond to it and get it right. Just going back to, I think Jacob, you mentioned something about, you asked me about Acklam Village. The question about. It wasn't turned down. It was referred onto the main planning committee because it was. I think the council said it's a minor application. I never really understood that, but that it was deferred because number of reasons around not doing enough. The perception there was not enough consultation with Norfolk Mews, and I know and I accept that there wasn't enough. Absolutely not enough. And
you want to work with
yeah.
that community is important, and you're putting in like a project like that, and it's been turned away on the basis you didn't consult, okay, and that you can't take it back unless you show that you have done significant change to that consultation.
Yeah.
If you hadn't been to that meeting, if you didn't bother to email.
I'll tell you the reason why we tried to put it through. Yeah. I'll tell you. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, part of the motivation, principally for taking it to the planning stage that we did, was because the project as it stood then was predominantly social housing, and we wanted to try to find a response to the housing need, and the council was under a lot of pressure to. No, do you mean you didn't know about it? Well, we actually don't get a say on that. Yeah. Well, we were, because it's the council. The council. But the council decide those things. We don't decide which planning committee it goes to. We don't have any say in that. No, it's just that's their process, and we are like everybody else. You put in an application, and then it gets filtered by the planning team.
You sound like you're not responsible for anything that you don't know.
No. I'm taking responsibility. We did take it through.
Then really, it goes back to what we said before. It needs to go back into the community needs to be making these decisions.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's like when you
Yeah,
talk about the
I agree.
Westway Information Centre
I agree.
and you say you sent a letter. It comes back to exactly what Jacob said about that. It's like you're not actually responsive, because you can't be responsive because it's actually not your space. It's not really in your heart to do those things. Now, if that was someone else approaching that, people would approach it in a different way, because we have a different view towards RBKC here. We have a different view towards those organisations. We have a different view towards the GLA.
And that's why we need more community people on the board and within. It does, because then you set the agenda then.
Well, yeah, but this is fine. So let's do that within the next 2 months, right? Let's get community CEOs. Let's get community people chairing the board. Let's do that then. Let's flip it in 2 months, because there's no real reason for why it needs to take any longer than that. Exactly as you said, it's down to the board. You recommend that to the board as a professional, your professional opinion as CEO. This is my opinion. In order to actually make this change happen, these are the significant, fundamental, radical changes that need to happen, which include me losing my job. But there you go. Because I believe in what I'm doing, that's the ultimate sacrifice, and that's worthwhile. But you're not going to do that, Alex. Are you? No, exactly. Of course you're not going to do that. You're not going to actually suggest that radical change is a real thing that can be done.
No, I am suggesting that there should be much more community decision making and determining of what happens here. Absolutely.
A load more voluntary work for all of us. Thanks, Alex. Thanks a lot.
If Tim Burt hadn't notified and gone out of his way to inform us of the planning application, then we wouldn't have had a decision on it, like Bay 20. So, we wouldn't have had a decision on it. It's not like you're saying, as a community, should we put this planning application through? Because we didn't get that. We didn't get that opportunity to say, you know, if we think this is a good plan. Because once you get it okay, then you're away. Why don't you just what we say doesn't, we can't stop you.
Yeah, it was. It was on the website. It's pushed through social media, and we hired a shop, or we used one. We didn't hire a shop. We used one of the shops in the arcade for a period of about 3 or 4 weeks, where we were advertising it and talking about it and asking people, do you think this is a good idea or not? And the majority of people said, we think it's a good idea now. We were that's so you know we that's why we did it.
With your newsletter that you send out to various people who you know get that newsletter, maybe if you put these kind of things in that newsletter, it would be a bit easier, because then people, you know, because people open emails, look at it, and they think, oh, and would be those things aren't in those newsletters.
Sorry, just for clarification, we put in the Inside Lane newsletters, is that what you're talking about, the email newsletters? Yeah. We put direct links for while the consultation period was open with the planning with RBKC, there actually were direct links. That's for, I believe, Bay 20 and also Ackland Village. Yeah, a link to the planning application where people could submit comments was on there. No, I mean, I can send you copies of the email that went out to thousands of people.
There was only one application, and you know, when it was referred to main committee, we had an opportunity to reconsider, and we decided to hold on that because we accepted we needed to do the deeper consultation, particularly with Norfolk Mews, and we decided that any future application should be split, so it wouldn't be one enormous scheme, it would be smaller relevant schemes that people could comment on. Sorry, Tom, you were going to...
The feedback on that consultation, I personally thought was appalling. It was just like baby language. We put in a lot of proposals for you. A lot of them actually fit this, your current strategy. We put in proposal for a heritage centre which could have been lottery funded to showcase Carnival and to showcase other communities. The Helter Skelter idea, it was always a bit of a joke, but it was actually to honour the playground movement, whatever it's called, the play movement of the 60s, who were the founders of Westway Trust, just because they were parents and horrified at the threat of the Westway going through. But a lot of well-thought ideas went in there, and the feedback, I know I photographed it, it was on the shop, and it was just appalling. It was for Sun readers. You know, we asked you, do you like shops? And you said, yes, we like shops. We didn't say the shops would sell £300 handbags, so you didn't say, no, we can't afford the handbags. But, you know, to me, it was insulting because it was baby language feedback when you were given really considered ideas and you didn't consider them. That's my feeling at the moment. And it was just a rehash of the previous one. But there we are. I hope all that's in the past. I hope that sort of, this is our idea, now we'll consult to get people to agree to it. I hope that's gone. I'm going to have a cup of tea anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Alex to wrap up. I mean, actually on that, Tom, you know, the tenants in the arcade said, don't pull it down, redevelop, refurbish it. And, you know, we said, right, you're right, and we'll do that. And so it's a question of listening and doing it differently. Doing it differently means listening to what people do, say, what they want, and trying to deliver that. And that is what we're committed to doing. And I understand the frustration. I understand that, but...
No, you really don't. You really,
okay.
really don't.
Can
I just say something? Okay, look, on because we have
to leave. We are not visible. For the first time we can visit because we are very, very grassroots. A lot of groups are Eritreans, Elders Welfare Association. So this is for us educational. The debate, discourse, and so on. Fantastic. So it's our first time really.
Yeah, last thing, and then we're going to finish because I think we're due to finish now. So.
Sorry, coming back to Acklam, because subterranean has been such a nightmare for 30 years, we actually know how to disperse that crowd from the Acklam entertainment area for minimum noise. I mean, you'll go to consultants, you'll pay them big money, they'll give you their textbook answer. We've looked at it, and Vince Power and that thing, for 30 years. We know we can't do it to subterranean, we know we can do it on a new build, so just come and talk to us.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate your time. We're going to be doing these monthly, so there's more opportunities, but we'll also look at other ways in which we can keep the conversation going, particularly around constitution, governance, because that is very fundamental at the moment. But thank you again, I do appreciate it.